Okay, let's look at moving an object with the mouse. We'll look at two versions of it. Start out by demo here. So here I'm moving the mouse, as you can see by the arrow, and the object, the blue square, is moving with it. So that's one version of it. That's one of the things we want to accomplish. And then I'm going to change this a little bit and run it again. And now, as I move the mouse, it doesn't move vertically, but it does move horizontally. So that's the one that we want for our meteor dodge game that we're going to do eventually. So let's take a look at the program. Okay, so we start with the usual stuff here. We've got some constants. I'm going to skip this stuff for the moment. Open the window, make a blue box, put it in the window, and then here's a loop. Now that's pretty much an empty loop. That is, it's not doing anything that you can see except pausing. And it's important that the loop actually be there because that's what rewrites the screen. That is, when I change the location of the mouse, it's supposed to change the location of the box, but I won't actually see anything unless I put pauses in, because the pause is one of the things that rewrites the screen. So that's a very important idea. The other thing that rewrites the screen is the start, and finally the stop. But for our purposes, we need to rewrite the screen very frequently so that the box can be seen to move with the mouse. Now let's look at the guts of the program. Starting right here, under a section that I've called functions, let's look at this line. This line says the mouse moved event handler is mouse moved. Now what do we mean by that? In modern programming, graphical user interface or GUI programming, you have events. I've clicked a key, I've clicked the space bar, I've moved the mouse, I've done a left click, I've done a right click, I've done a click and drag, things like that. Those are all those are all events, and I need to handle those events. The code that I write to handle them has to be registered in the Python language. So I've registered mouse moved as the mouse moved event handler. That says whenever the mouse is moved, with every single tiny move, 1 pixel, run the mouse moved code. Now let's look at the mouse moved code. The mouse moved code says def mouse moved. That's define the mouse move function. And oh, by the way, it needs some information, and I've called that information EVT, which in my mind stands for event. The event of mouse moved records the X location and the Y location where the mouse moved to. So I'm saying call, every time the mouse is moved, call mouse moved. And what is mouse moved? It's a function. It's the first function that I've written myself that's in a program, and you will write these. It's called mouse moved, and it gets an EVT. That EVT contains information about where the mouse moved. Now, this line here says global box. What is box? Well, it's this thing right here. It's the blue square, the dark blue square. And global says that box is not local. It doesn't belong just to mouse moved. It belongs to the entire program. If I took that out, then Python would think the box that we're talking about is a box that I'm creating inside here. And that's not what I want. The box that I'm talking about needs to be this box. So I make that happen by saying global box. Now declare a couple of extra variables here. Xloc, it reaches into that event record and says get the X location. That says how we do it. So xloc is evt.pause sub 0. That's where the X location is stored inside the event record evt. Similarly, the new Y location of the mouse is stored in evt.pause sub 1. So this records, these two lines record the X location the mouse has been moved to and the Y location the mouse has been moved to. Now let's look at the first version. This says when the mouse is moved, that function runs, take the box, set its location to the X location and the Y location. But this is an offset. It says offset the box a little bit farther to the left. This says offset the box a little bit higher up. And the net result of this calculation is that the box is centered under the mouse instead of being at the below and to the right of the mouse. So Whenever the mouse is moved, we take the box, we get the locations of the mouse movement, and we set the box to be at the mouse location, but offset a little bit so it's centered. Let's take a quick look and run it. And that's that. It's centered. Now, let's change this. And look at this version of it. This says, set the location. And the X location right there depends on the X location of the mouse click. So that's exactly the same stuff as we had before. We said wherever the mouse is, set the box's location to that location in terms of the X, and then offset it so it's centered. This, however, says set the Y location of the box to something different. In fact, it says set the Y location to the height, which is the bottom, but then back up a little bit so the box is sitting on the bottom edge. In other words, the X location changes, but the Y location that I'm setting the location to, the Y location does not change. It's always at the bottom of the window. So I'm moving the X and I'm moving the mouse, and the box is moving to correspond to the mouse in the X and the Y direction. But the height is, the Y location is never changing. It's always at the bottom of the window. And that's it.